Good morning, everybody. What a pleasure to be here on this day 2. This morning, what we're going to do is just shift our focus a bit from looking at trade-offs that we talked about yesterday between human and environmental health to exploring options and approaches for enabling sustainable diets. And that includes policy approaches, economic, educational, and research approaches. But as we do so, I'd like to call out or highlight also some of the challenges that I heard yesterday and that I see we have in front of us. So first, I'd like to suggest that as we're moving forward today in our discussions and in our talks today, that we think about moving closer to opportunities for systems thinking, or perhaps synergies, as Chris mentioned yesterday. So instead of looking at complex issues that are embedded in sustainable food systems or diets as either-or situations, which is kind of a siloed approach, we look at them as both-and situations. What options can allow us to improve environmental health, economic health, and human health simultaneously? Now, that's a tall order, I know that. But I believe that's one of the goals of this food forum. So the 3 speakers that we have today are all experts in systems thinking, and I'm sure they're going to get our discussion off to the right start. And I just want to mention that we've come a long way in 25 years, and I'd like to just start out by sharing one personal example. I'm a trained nutritionist and dietitian, and in the 70s and 80s when I first started practice, most nutritionists and dietitians were out there in communities, hospitals, and clinics, confident in their roles of promoting health through improved diets, and that's still a primary role today. Then, in 1986, Dr. Joan Gusso and Dr. Kate Clancy, who's with us today on the panel, published an article called Dietary Guidelines for Sustainability. It was in the Journal of Nutrition Education, and in that article, they proposed building diets and food choices based on criteria that took the environment and limits to our natural resources into account. And in that article, they coined the term sustainable diets. Now, that article, the people before it that helped provide some of that thinking, I think helped change the face of the nutrition field for many of us henceforth. No longer was nutrition education just about human health, but it could also include a concern for the environment and for our communities. Now, I know we're going to be hearing more about that kind of systems thinking from Kate, as well as Tim and Jennifer, as they talk about some of the implications of the dietary guidelines. The second thing I want us to consider as we have these discussions is to be mindful about how our discussions include or perhaps even exclude those of different racial, ethnic, or income classes who are not represented with us here today, those who have historically not had much of a voice in critiquing or designing sustainable diets, at least here in the United States. I think sustainability includes not only the present and future health of our food economies and environment, but also social justice for all those engaged in the food system. And as we know, those disenfranchised are often those hardest hit by environmental resource limits. And I know Jennifer is going to address that a little bit in the context of her comments on research priorities for a sustainable diet. Then the third and final concept that I want to hold up and underline, we heard it a lot yesterday, is this concept of diversity as we talk about sustainable diets. And I know that there is no one answer to all the complex issues that we're facing regarding sustainable food choices. In fact, there are probably a lot of options open to us. We can take notice of what other regions and other countries are doing to address food, the environment, and social justice challenges. So our first speaker, Dr. Tim Lang, Professor of Food Policy at the Center for Food Policy, City University of London, and a former chair of SUSTAIN, which is a UK Food Environmental Alliance, will open our session this morning by telling us about some of the interesting developments on sustainable diets from across the pond. He'll describe the extent to which the UK is achieving some of its goals on supporting sustainable farming, enhancing the environment and biodiversity, and supporting a strong, sustainable green economy, and what challenges are involved in that. Dr. Lang will be followed by Dr. Kate Clancy, food systems consultant, visiting scholar with the Center for a Livable Future at Johns Hopkins University, and senior fellow at University of Minnesota's Institute for Sustainable Agriculture. And she's going to follow Tim by talking about how new farm policies that we're considering can help achieve sustainable diets and what sort of practical, realistic assumptions we need to build into new models. And finally, we're going to hear from Jennifer Wilkins, registered dietitian, also nutritionist and senior extension associate at Cornell University's Division of Nutritional Sciences. She's going to wrap up the speaking part of our session this morning and focus on past and future research, including some of her own very interesting research on regional food guides. And she's going to address what research has been successful, or has research been successful in connecting dietary guidance, human and environmental health, and how can food system research support sustainable diets? So each speaker is going to have about 25 minutes to speak, and then we'll move into a period at the end, as we did yesterday, where it's going to be a group discussion. So we can begin, and I'd like to invite Dr. Tim Lang to come forward, and please join me in welcoming him.